to This, That, and the Other, where we talk about all things Detroit and Michigan State sports. And today, as promised, we are talking about Michigan State's spring game, which happened this past Saturday. And a full disclosure, I did not actually watch the game. I said that I probably wouldn't, but I might check it out. So we'll be going over some of the statistics, some of the notable things, but just know that I did not actually watch the game. I'm kind of winging this, going off of watching all the regular season games. But we'll start out, the green team, which is the defense, wins the game 42-26. And if you're unfamiliar with how Michigan State's spring games work, basically it's offense versus defense the whole game, in terms of the whole defense as a unit and the whole offense as a unit. So there's no drafting, there's no mixing up players, having a backup quarterback play with your starting receiver, although they do play a lot of freshmen and unexperienced players in their spring games, just like any other program. But the defense is the defense and the offense, and they're just competing as a game. So green, which is the defense, won. And the way the scoring works is they get points for holding the other team without a score for 3 or more minutes, red zone stops, turnovers. I can't tell you all the point values. But the important thing to note is that the defense won, I guess. And I think that's very significant because when you look at an entire game where the defense is on the field, the entire game giving up 26 points, I think is pretty good. And, for the offense, it's hard to really, I don't really know if it's more geared toward the offense where the advantage is in this, but I said in the last podcast that no matter what happened in this game, this spring game, that people were probably going to be freaking out because we didn't know if the offense was that bad or the defense was that good. At this point, excuse me, that was high-pitched snivel there. And the important thing to remember is that, or going back to my point, was that you didn't know if it was going to be because the defense was so good or the offense was so bad. But by now we know this defense is top notch. They were, I think, the best defense in the nation last year. They might not show that statistically, but if you look at how bad the offense was and the fact that the defense was on the field for almost 40 minutes each game toward the end of the season, and they even despite that, they improved throughout the season, and they bring all their defensive coaches back. Yeah, I think this is the best defense, at least in the Big Ten. Like I said, statistically it might not show that, but that's the important thing to remember. So from what I've heard, the offense did move the ball. Brian Lewerke actually had some pretty decent stats. 14 out of 20, 181 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and I believe there was 3 interceptions, but one of them was ripped out of Brandon Sauer's hands, which is, a lot of people have been saying, no disrespect to the kid, but man, it's hard to believe he's playing sometimes, and it's hard to believe he got another redshirt senior year. But I have no ill will toward the kid, and I'm sure he's a great person, and he's probably a great football player too, but I just don't think he's a Big Ten starting receiver. But that's the end on that I'm going to say about that. But Josiah Scott ripped out an interception out of his hands, and I believe there's another tipped interception, and I believe there was one interception that was legitimately his fault. But overall, the consensus, people are saying it looks like he's got his arm strength back, it looks like he's got his accuracy, and it looks like, they're going to be good with him going forward. It looks like what people are saying is that they have a lot of playmakers on this team this year, which we already knew. They had Cody White and Darryl Stewart had a big spring game as well. And I think their backups for the first time are actually starting to get a little bit more involved, not just with the spring game, but obviously you saw Rocky Lombardi play some very significant time last year where he started several games and won them a couple games. And I think that's going to be valuable going forward because, as you know, anytime a 3 or 4 year starter leaves Michigan State at the quarterback position, you have to kind of hold your nose after that because the next person, I believe that quarterbacks go stale if they don't play within their first 2 years. A lot of times, I think maybe that's not the rule, but it seems like that's been what's happened for Michigan State. But good that they're getting some action. I hope they get some playing time this year as well. So, and I'm just going to go back here and look at some of the stats again. Defensive stats. You have Chase Klein, who's I believe a freshman with 8 tackles. Jacob Panashu is a veteran, 7 tackles and half a tackle for a loss, and he's going to be a huge part of their defense this year. I'm really excited to see their secondary this year. Josiah Scott, and they got Kalen Gervin, who's supposed to be a stud at the cornerback position. Josh Butler, who I believe is a very solid player still. And with the departure of Justin Lane, I believe he should get some pretty significant minutes or time on the field, whichever you rather. So I think that's going to be very important. They already have a great defensive line, and probably the best player on their defense is probably still Joe Bacci in the linebacker. So I don't want to say they're set, but I think they're really set up for success this year on defense. And really, the offense, they don't really need to be that great. I think Brian Lewerke, I don't know, even after his spring game, I still don't know if he's going to be a blue chip kind of quarterback that's going to be projected going the first round NFL draft. I still go back and I compare him a little bit to Drew Stanton, where he's got some pretty good numbers, but maybe he just doesn't quite, maybe, I don't know. Maybe the stats just leave a little bit to be desired. Last year, not so much the year before, and we expected a big progression last year, and his injury, really complicated that. So, I could definitely be wrong, but his stats were great on Saturday. Let's at least acknowledge that. But I think it's going to be, like I said last podcast, you can't tell anything from a spring game. You just can't. And there's been smoke and mirrors before. But yeah, I still refuse to take too much stock in what happens in the spring game. So some of the playmakers they got coming back really going to be important. That Cody White stays healthy all year. They really need to have more production from their tight ends. Now that they switched the tight ends coach, I can't remember, Jim Bowman's, who was the tight end coach, is now the offensive line coach, which was his specialty. So you got to ask yourself why he was doing tight end duty, and why that probably explains why they weren't catching passes. So, and this MSU offensive coaching staff, there's been a lot of complaints that they didn't make enough changes, or they didn't get rid of anybody. They just demoted some people and promoted some other people to their other jobs, and they switched a lot of duties. And I can't remember the guy's name, but the receivers coach, who I thought actually did a pretty good job, got put into Don Treadwell's job or something like that, which is kind of not really, just kind of like a favor position, like as a favor to him because he worked for them in the past. But everyone wanted them to fire their coaches, and I wouldn't have been upset certainly if they had just cleaned house. But the reality is the offense just needs to be adequate in order for this to be an elite football team. go to the college football playoff, beat your rivals, win a Big Ten championship. They don't need to, they don't have to have a prolific offense that scores 49 points a game. Really, if they can get over the 30 mark, they're going to win most games. So it's still a long way off. A lot of people have been talking a lot about the new uniforms, which are the alternate neon on dark green uniforms, trying to kind of take after the basketball team. Everyone is, it's been a subject to a lot of jokes. The big, large state numbers, and the fact that they were wearing Seahawks gloves. I still don't know the story behind that. The only thing that really bothered me about the jersey was that the numbers were white, but everything else, all the other letters were neon, and I don't understand why they did that. The state thing, the large state letters I could live with, and ultimately, I'm fine with whatever they decide to put out there for one game. It's not gonna replace their regular uniform. I think that's what people need to remember when they lose their minds, is that if they're probably going to just wear it against Arizona State. That's when I predict they'll wear them, because it's kind of a Pac-10 thing where you have a audience from the West Coast and you're trying to make a little bit of an impression, that you're not a boring program, I guess. And it kind of has a little bit of Pac-10 flavor, because a lot of people say it looks like Oregon, something like that. And, I don't know what to say about that, but I think for sure it's going to be the Arizona State game, and maybe they'll mix another one in there. But kind of insignificant, but a lot of people were talking about it. So I thought it'd be important to mention. And so I don't have the schedule in front of me. I know their first game is going to be against Tulsa. It's going to be on a Friday night, as per usual. I really think it's a good tradition they have, starting the season on a Friday night. Certainly not that big of a deal, but it's kind of a nice way to start your Memorial or Labor Day weekend. Excuse me. I think that's really all I have to say about the spring game right now. Like I said, at this point in time, it's all smoke and mirrors, and we all thought we were going to have a great season going into this year, so it's not pointless to project, but, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this, but, we still got a lot of time to talk about. We still got 5 months to go before we really start thinking about this upcoming season, and it'll be fun to talk about all the different developments that are coming out. Another interesting thing, Eric Snow's son was on an official visit for the spring game, and he really actually liked the alternate uniforms. So that's kind of a little side note, and hopefully, we add another terrific corner to our secondary in a year or two. And just another side note, the Pistons got destroyed by the Milwaukee Bucks last night, and I already bought tickets for Game 3. I'm not going to try to get out of it. I'm still excited for it, but sounds like Blake Griffin might be out for the series, but I might do another video on the Pistons later this week. But my thought right now is you got to try to win a playoff game in this series. I know that it seems impossible. Antetokounmpo is, I think, kind of like the new LeBron James in the East now. He's kind of taken the torch from him. But you just got to gut out one game, and I think you got to try to get Blake out there. I think I heard somewhere that he's not going to make his injury any worse, likely. So I think he needs to gut it out, and they need to try to get a win. It's for the fans. You made the playoffs for the fans, so you got to give it a legitimate shot. We all know you're not going to win the series, but I'll have more thoughts on that later. And for now, thank you for listening. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And yeah, thanks for listening. And go green and go Pistons for what it's worth. Thanks.